Welcome to CyberSecurity Heroes, an IRONSCALES podcast about you, the heroes of cybersecurity. You're about to hear and learn practical and experiential knowledge in our conversations with security leaders and practitioners and other influential InfoSec stars, so we can become more cyber resilient and safer together. CyberSecurity Heroes is brought to you by IRONSCALES, the most powerfully simple email security platform. And I'm your host, Brendan Rudd. And now, let's get into the show. Hey, Steven, welcome back to the show.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you very much for having me back.
Good to have you back. And today we're going to talk about why search and delete won't get the job done. So if you don't know what that means, don't worry. We're going to unpack that for you. So yes, today we're going to talk about a subset of phishing incident response and why it's broken. It's typically referred to as search and delete, but I have spoken with many former email admins, including my guest today, Steven, thank you, that this may not be the most effective approach. And that's why we wanted to take this opportunity to explore this topic in more depth. But for our audience, could you just explain what do you mean when you say search and delete?
Yeah, it's kind of a reactive approach, right? So I, find out about some kind of malicious email, and I think it's bad. Or I need to protect the rest of my environment. So I'm literally going to search through all mail, malicious, non-malicious, and I'm going to identify those mails and delete them out of my environment. And I think that, and I know this strategy, I use this strategy, and I think a lot of folks they just, it's the best tools that they have out of the box. Right? When you get any major kind of commercial email software for your environment, that's the go-to thing that is provided out of the box. And it's no longer a effective strategy because the volume and attackers know that it's not very efficient, right? It's why they're having a lot of success. So we're literally designing a search and then deleting the message out of the environment.
So other than, deleting the email, what is wrong with this approach? Like searching for emails and deleting. Can you break it up into two? What's wrong with searching manually for emails and what's wrong with just deleting the email?
Yeah. So the first part of that, right? It's, I think the biggest part, we talk about this concept of the known knowns, the unknown knowns, and the unknown unknowns, right? And in the search process, right, the big problem is those unknown unknowns because, when you think about a concept like polymorphic attacks, meaning when you see a huge volume attacks, but 10 of them have a different subject, the other half have a different sender, some of them have a modified subject. They have different content. They have IPs that they're coming from that are different, right? All these kind of pieces of metadata that are varied, that really starts to pick away at the effectiveness of a search and delete strategy because you are searching based on a one-to-one match of those elements. If the subject is one letter off, you may not find it. Right? If it's the same exact attack, but it came from, Brad instead of Brendan, right? And I'm searching for the sender, and trying to delete from that perspective. That is a big problem. So it's what does someone, explicitly know? I have this threatening email in front of me, and kind of what can they reasonably, predict or search around, like, well, I think it might have come in on this same date. Well, the problem is that these campaigns now last for months, right? So now I've done this work and I've encountered all these problems, but it didn't really solve my issue. because I'm still getting hit with it, right? So, I mean, there's a number of different problems with it, but I would say the unknown is because the biggest thing is just you get a false sense of security, like you're actually safe. And I, you know, I definitely had that, right? And it was the best tool set we had at the time, but also resource constraints, right? We don't have hundreds of email admins running around staring at things. So, how much time are you going to give to any one individual incident, right? And how deep is your search going to go, and how long is it going to search for, right? There's a bunch of different variables there. That means I think I found 20 of these or 30 of these and I've deleted them all. We're all safe, guys, right? That is unfortunately the assumption that a lot of people are making. And a lot of the time that's not the case with these sophisticated new age kind of attacks.
And my follow-up question around deleting emails, are we losing out on the ability to train solutions by just deleting emails without actually feeding that email to the system to learn? Are we missing out by just deleting emails?
Yeah, deleting, right? Like, how do you profile that campaign over time? How do you know, like, when you see folks deploying training and simulation awareness, the threat you deleted, that's valuable data that you need to know. I have a real problem because every one of these ones that I've deleted is a sender display name impersonation, or it's a domain lookalike, or what have you. I'm not necessarily feeding that back to my team that's doing training and awareness. Right? This is a real opportunity from a human perspective, but also if you have any kind of tools that rely on this kind of critical data, like we think I think it's probably better that you quarantine these things and you're able to have an opportunity to understand these TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures of how these guys are attacking any given environment. So yeah, definitely deleting it and getting rid of it. It's okay, but there are more opportunities you can do and opportunities to learn from that data that really you're kind of losing out on.
Mm-hmm. And maybe this somewhat overlaps the previous question, but maybe you can just unpack it a little more. But from speaking with customers about this, what are some of the other challenges IT and InfoSec departments are facing when it comes to responding to potential phishing emails that have already landed in employees' inboxes?
So they're facing that same blind spot, right? As things are landing in, and as it's a speed, it's a volume thing at this point. Where the number of phishing incidents has only increased over time. Every single year, it's getting bigger. The problem is getting more voluminous, and also it's getting more personalized. It's very cheap and easy to send a malicious mail. When I have AI solutions that can automatically generate a hyper-specific email that is based on your social media, your LinkedIn, your what have you, right? Like this, I guess the thing that is happening is these teams are getting overwhelmed from a soft cost perspective, from a resource perspective, because A, remediating them, thinking that they're safe, and then B, they're having to do it far more often, and they're having to respond, much more quickly than I did, 5 or 10 years ago when we first saw this. And, it was mostly about technological damage. It really wasn't, as much about the financial aspect of it for these attackers. Does that kind of answer it?
Yeah, and what you're saying, I've heard from some of my guests, and I'm not talking about large enterprises. I'm talking about like small to medium sized companies. Their IT teams are dealing with anywhere between 500 and 1,000 phishing emails a month. So if you divide that up into the work week, that's a ton of time. If your analysts or your admins have to be like working on each email one by one throughout the day with all the other things that they have to deal with.
And the thing is I guess the scariest or the most concerning thing is you don't know that number you gave. Maybe I only have, as an email admin or a security analyst, maybe I only have 10 or 15% visibility into all of that. Maybe, I don't know the complete threat and I can't articulate it upward properly. And so it becomes this vicious cycle of we don't know what we don't know, and we can't get the resources because we can't articulate it because we're overwhelmed, right? It's this really, really nefarious type of thing that not knowing in itself and not having good data and good visibility to it is a threat into itself.
Mm-hmm. So as an ex-email admin, can you walk us through how it was dealing with phishing emails and, reported emails back in the day?
Yeah.
And how has that changed today?
Yeah, I think the short answer to that second question is, unfortunately, for a lot of companies, it hasn't changed significantly. So my experience, 5 or 10 years ago is very, very relevant still to this day. I mean, this is in technology terms, email is pretty ancient, like as a base technology, but we still heavily rely on it for a lot of our commercial business, especially in a lot of westernized countries. So for me, it's the start is that I'm sitting there, doing my day-to-day thing, looking at some settings, looking at something that we're maybe a project that we're going to implement some new feature, function, whatever, and I get the chat or the email or the call or something that, hey, I need you to take a look at something, right? Like, what is this? Is this phishing? Is this spam? It went to somebody that's important, right? Some director, senior director of this or VP of that, right? And right there, my whole day has kind of come to a complete halt. And now I'm staring at this thing. And now I have to say, look, I don't know yet. Send me this. Maybe they have the data, maybe they don't. Maybe they have email headers, maybe I need to go help them collect them, right? And they just have forwarded an email on and they don't really have it. So there's a discovery process, an investigation process. Just get me enough data so that I can make an opinion on it, right? Then there's like an analysis part. I'm going to dig through email headers. I'm going to look at URLs and maybe submit them to, third-party services to investigate, are these threat mails? Are these, I'm going to look at the content of the message. Where did it come from? Are these legitimate servers? Who's the sender, right? All that kind of thing. What's that routing look like? I'm going to look at the domain. I'm going to look if there's an attachment. I'm probably going to have a sandbox of some kind that I'm going to detonate that thing into and try to observe as best I can the results. If I'm an enterprise environment, I might be bringing in somebody that has some of those tools. But if I'm kind of at a small shop, I might be the lone wolf there and having to do all of that. That's just the investigation to get to the point of this is a problem or it's not, or it's kind of a problem. Like, so now it's a question of how many people have actually seen this? Is it just this guy or girl? Is it all these, is it the entire company? Like what's the real impact? How, right? So that is where I start to understand what's the impact and then also start to think about what do we really need to do with this? Is this thing actually spam? And I can just email back the guy, hey, you don't have to worry about it. It's legitimately a coupon from a store that you just don't want, and it just looks a little weird, or it's something that's really malicious and out to do harm. So then, but am I telling that to him, one person or two people, or am I telling that to 100 people in the organization, right? And then, but also in the meantime, what am I doing to get it out? And we're back to when I'm looking through how many people it's impacted, I'm now also starting to think about, how do I mitigate this? Do I get it? Do I delete them all? Do I move them somewhere? What do I do? Right. And then that kind of last piece is that communication. Here's what I found. Here's what we did. Here's, and maybe like it can vary wildly. It can be very quick, right? 5-10 minutes. I see it. I've seen 100 of these, in a day, and I'm used to seeing this versus this one looks pretty nefarious. And frankly, maybe it identified a weakness in my infrastructure. And now the remediation is not just get rid of this email, but it's now kicked off a project that I'm saying, look, guys, we've got to make this kind of change to whether it's an SPF record, whether it's a DMARC, record, or who knows, right? Maybe it's something on the endpoint that we need to be looking at. Maybe it came from an insider threat. Someone's client got exploited, and now they're sending it from internal. Who knows? So the mitigation and that process, that could be half an hour, or it could be days, depending on the environment and the ability to make changes quickly. And then finally, like I said, that communication piece. And that's big because it's not just telling the end users, here's what it is, here's what to do with it. It's also senior leadership and other folks saying, we have a problem, we don't have a problem, here's what I found, here's what we can do about it, right? And this all is quite an extensive thing. And it's all based and predicated on my ability to do the proper search, right? And if 4 of these come in at a time and I'm searching for all 4 of them simultaneously, obviously I can't do a great job on any one of them, right? If they're particularly malicious. So the time element really starts to stack up, especially as you see the market get more and more intense with the volume and the specificity, and how cheap and easy it is to get a $10 phishing kit online with 24/7, 365 customer support, right? Like, it really boggles the mind. It's become its own economy. So that's how has it changed today is, unfortunately, it's, unless you've gone out and made specific efforts to improve this process and give a lot of extra tools, probably is pretty similar to what I was doing. At least when I talk to clients, unfortunately, it sounds really similar to the way in which I was operating.
Some of my guests speak about creating a forward to mailbox abuse, but that is a very small piece of the puzzle. But I think to some degree that's like the extent of how much things have progressed in 10 years. I mean, of course, there's technology out there that we'll get to towards the latter half of the show. But for most companies, I would say, and I mean, you speak with customers every day, like how much of the workflow and process has changed? How is it today?
Yeah, I mean, that is, as I said, it's, unfortunately, it's I can't find a real appreciable difference, to be honest. Only in the, if I had to put a number on it, right? It's probably 5 or 10% of the clients that I talk to have a good workflow and automation and process built, right, to handle this and operationalize this. When you talk about the forwarding mailbox, really, that's just this end of the spectrum, right? Just getting notification that there's an issue. That just starts the process. So if I do a really good job on notifying it, now for my admin, I've made it really easy to report way more emails than I could ever possibly investigate. It becomes a very noisy affair and very I think that's really where what's happened now is, if you see something, say something dynamic, which is great. The problem is lots of people are saying things. And that original point we talked about of, we didn't realize we had such a big problem sitting in folks' mailboxes. And now that we've got everybody active, now our team is just totally underwater, having to investigate all these, or they just hit a point of diminishing return. So that's, unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the current experience I hear from folks.
I've spoken about this a couple of times on shows prior. I'm not sure if I discussed it with you, but the feeling is that in email security, at least, people and process can only take you so far. Technology is a huge enabler when it comes to email security. And I think because the industry is maybe like inundated, it sort of dilutes the efficacy of technology when it comes to email security, because everybody's kind of screaming on the top of the hilltops, technology. But in most industries or in most categories of security, it's down to people and process. But in email security, technology is a huge percentage of the battle and the fight to be either proactive or at least more secure.
Yeah, I think you definitely nailed it. It's people, process. I think it's all of that, right? Technology has a role, but I think that, kind of what's been promised out on that market is just buy my technology. It's going to cure what ails you. It just throw it at it and then job done. We're always going to keep it out of the mailbox. That's what we're going to do. We're going to keep it right out of that mailbox. And if that worked, companies like ours wouldn't even be around because this is the same exact solution that was provided a decade ago, right? And the problem is not less, it's far greater than it ever was. So if we could just throw technology at it and be, safe and secure, yeah, it will just be, it's ineffective. And there's folks out there that they have the newer, shinier version of that, and they're having the same conversation of, oh, but our new shinier mousetrap, that's the much better way to handle it. And they're neglecting the other piece of this, right? The human and the process, right? It ultimately, because these attackers are using technology and they themselves are applying a lot of human intelligence. Who's been beating all this stuff? It's been human beings. So if they're smart enough to cause the problem, they're certainly smart enough to participate if we educate and train them appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems clear that it's going to be a human and machine approach, and we can touch on that as well towards the latter half. But coming back to the current workflow and experience, so you did touch on this as well a little bit, but typically how long does that whole process take? You mentioned it depends on the magnitude of the attack, but what does it typically take to investigate a single phishing email or potential phishing email?
I mean, and it's going to vary person to person. How thorough they're going to be, how good are they going to be, right? Like just that investigation, and I think you'll have folks that say, well, I think probably the most aggressive email admins that I talk to are citing times like 15 minutes. I think many of them will say somewhere in the range from 30 to 60 minutes. I think the research studies I've seen is about 33 minutes. So it all feels pretty, above board to me, that it's probably half an hour to an hour. I think there are some folks that maybe they've got good processes in place and they've got some things to make it a little easier and decrease that burden, but that's got to come way, way down, right? That's still entirely too slow. And right, you're no longer, you're doing damage control at that point, I think.
And that process was not just searching for the email. We're talking about the entire process from detection to response.
Yeah, detection and response, right? That could take hours, or like I said, it could even be days if I've now identified a vulnerability in our infrastructure, or there's some weakness in the settings or configuration, or something with the SSL, or certificate, anything, right? Who knows what's in that black bag of, you find something and the unknown. Did it know we had this vulnerability? Wasn't caught in the last audit that our corporation, our company did, right? Even though we're trying to do the right thing, nothing is perfect. So I think that that dynamic is lost. Most people are saying, oh, well, it's just a few minutes, right? And I look at it and I kind of make a gut decision, right? And most of them would just tell you, oh, I'm just going to defer and just say it's phishing and then just delete it. It's easier than if I actually analyze it, right? So that's a strategy that I hear every once in a while, is like, that's how we're so fast. We just, if there's any indecision, we just rip it out. And then they always tell me that the unfortunate ramifications of that is the one guy who actually, it was legitimate, or that one time it's legitimate, now they've deleted something and now it's a problem. They're in trouble with VP or CE level, whatever, right? Where's my email? Oh, it's gone. Gone.
So I think we've kept our audience in suspense enough, and now we owe it to them to pay it off. So what technologies and solutions are available today that, are making this process more effective and streamlined?
Yeah, I think the technology, I think if you look at, the ICS offerings out there, right, from Gartner, that's their new category, right? We're seeing kind of those commoditized controls that were largely virus and spam controls, and they were more about addressing the noise. Those are getting less effective because the threat the ground shifted beneath everybody's feet. The threat itself is different, personalized, financial in nature, right? And it's designed to exploit the person sitting at the keyboard, right? It's not necessarily meant to go after technology and exclusivity. So this is the thing. There's technologies out there, and I would say that can look at the language. They can look at what's being said. They don't have to worry and wait to find out, well, is that URL bad or attachment bad? I know that I want you to click on it urgently. I'm going to say my email. Click, I need your help right now. Can't wait. It's from the boss, right? And it's got to happen. And I need you to change that wiring information. And boy, oh boy, and you didn't notice that it came from somebody with an S at the end of the domain when none normally existed, right? That domain lookalike, right? You've been spoofed. But because you drove that person to act, right? You have to really understand the people that you're protecting and who they normally interact with. And also, I'll just say, anything that can cluster mails together and search and do that kind of fuzzy matching throughout the environment, this is a massive improvement, right? I can't possibly see every nook and cranny of if I'm dealing with 5 or 10,000 users, right? There's just no way I can ever dedicate the proper, as an email or even an email team. There's no way I can dedicate the number of resources I need to really effectively stay on top of it within the seconds that I need to do it, right? If I'm waiting a half an hour, we're gone. And so the problem is can I get something that also amplifies my ability? I make a decision on something and that decision is retained and learned, and it will continue to act on future mails that match that same pattern, right? Is that learning over time with each kind of incident that I resolve, but also that clustering things together. One person reports something, they have a massive impact with technologies like that because they report it and all of a sudden, all these mails have been pulled together in one single thing. This guy was the only guy that was suspicious of it, but guess what? Now that he's reported it through the proper means, these technologies will bring it all together in one single thing and remediate it all at the same time and understand that threat. So this is the big thing. And also, I think that automation, right? Things that we know, right? They're templated based attacks. They're the same attacks they use. I cannot tell you. I see a lot of the same attacks often. I mean, I see ones that are hyper personalized, but I also see the same Prince of Nigeria one to this day. I see the sextortions ones. I see, it's wild how, and these things are wasting a huge amount of time, money, and effort for companies. And they could just
And maybe they're actually just a distraction to get one in that can be the jackpot, email.
Absolutely. I've got everybody running around trying to search and delete, and I can't find that real one. That's the real malicious one going to my CEO or something.
Perhaps I know we spoke about it on previous episode, but just, repetition is the mother of learning, as they say. So can you also maybe talk a little bit about like how the technology today is empowered to do these things?
Yeah.
How is the technology integrated into customer environments that allows it to do these things better, faster, automated? You talked about learning, pattern matching. So can you maybe just go back a few steps for us just to bring some? No, it's fine. Just not everyone is listening to our episodes in a linear fashion.
Sure,
so we'll just assume We have a whole new audience tonight or today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the technologies that we're using are, like I said, email, SMTP. The protocol that it uses is, I want to say 2 or 3 decades old at least. I think 1980s, late 1970s, early 1980s, if I remember correctly, right? Like this is a very, very antiquated technology. And instead, being able to react and respond at a huge amount of scale, taking advantage of cloud, parallel computing and parallel operation, right? And using some of the APIs that these commercial vendors are exposing, you can analyze these things in seconds or even under seconds, like milliseconds, hundreds of milliseconds, and you're already responding so much quicker than you ever could possibly do it with a physical box that's limited. And if I jam too much email through it too fast, it starts to lock up and my email flow goes down, right? The technology itself is taking advantage of this parallel cloud computing environment, this massive amount of resources that people aren't taking advantage of as much as they could be yet. And I think that's really how these technologies are approaching it. They're building on top of that stack that made everything more accessible and easier to remediate at speed, but also at scale, right? If I'm going to go and look across your Exchange environment and I start searching all over there, guess what? I'm going to bring that thing to its knees. And you're really going to see performance impacts. Whereas these cloud node-based kind of deployments, they can handle that kind of mass kind of processing across a wide range of inboxes. So that's, I think, the technology side, right? How do we do it? How do we still find it effective?
So thanks for all of that, Stephen. As we wrap up today's episode, is there anything else you would like to share, end off with? Anything we might have missed on this subject of search and delete?
Just, I think that when you're going through these things and you're seeing the difference, reach out to some of these vendors, take a look at what's out there, right? I understand that folks are busy day to day and there's attacks that are coming in and, but the investment you might make in exploring some new technology and new tool might really pay massive dividends quickly and over time and give you some of that visibility that you didn't already have. Personally, for me, I've seen, a variety of different tools out in the marketplace that I'm highly surprised and kind of disappointed that, the roles I was in, we weren't kind of accessing all that and utilizing some of that protection that we could have been and making the investment and really allowing the response and ultimately securing the environment. So it's a little disappointed that put so much time into this and now, man, it's so much easier today to be able to react if you have the right stuff.
You lost many years of life doing search and delete.
Absolutely. many years. So I'm glad to see that there are now tools from various vendors out there that will meet that need.
And I think this also taps into like cyber burnout. I'm sure admins like hate doing this stuff and it doesn't
become numb to it,
doesn't add to their job satisfaction by having to do such laborious work, and especially when you're under the gun, right? Like if I think the average is 82 seconds for an end user to click on a phishing email. How are you going to manage that with the current process?
That's the thing is like with this traditional methodology, and I mean, maybe it's getting a little bit better with some of these reporting organizations, but honestly, by the time it's made its way, because if me in an enterprise, like just getting to me is, did I go to the service desk? Did I go to this person? Did I know somebody that knew the right guy or girl to escalate this to? Right? Like by the time it actually even gets to me, probably there's at least 10, 20, 30 minutes have gone by And now the question is more about damage control. How do I keep the fire from burning more broadly, as opposed to how do I actually stop the bad thing from happening to begin with? That's really where we have to start to shift and look for tools that are going to stop the bad thing from occurring, as opposed to doing great forensics to say the attacker busted out of that window over there, they jumped over the fence, and they were doing it at about 15 meters a second, right? They were moving at this speed, and they did all this fancy. They did a backflip right over here, right? Like that. All that information is really helpful, I guess. I guess in an academic sense, but when you're a business leader, I really want to hear we stopped it first and foremost. I don't want to hear, well, you're down $200,000 or $300,000. You're gonna miss your number because somebody wired to the wrong bank, something like that. That's not, I can tell you, I've been in those rooms. I've had those conversations. That's not a satisfying conversation to have. And it's a tool limitation. It's a resource limitation, right? And it can be mitigated and can be addressed, but the tools that you give and the way in which you address it and the way you focus on it really matters. And it not when it's already, if you're dealing with it at the moment, already way too late. It's already like you're already in bad shape if you're using the breach or the incident to start addressing these problems that have probably been sitting there and persisting for a long time. So,
well, thank you so much, Stephen. It was great to have you back on the show, and I'm sure we'll chat with you again soon. And thanks everyone for tuning in to CyberSecurity Heroes.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Really appreciated being on here. It's been great.
That's a wrap for this episode of CyberSecurity Heroes. Practical and experiential knowledge on a day in the life of security heroes. Catch our next episode by subscribing or following through your favorite podcast platform. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, please leave a rating for the show. They really help a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.